All right, we're headed to southern Iowa to visit with Doug Hampton. Doug has hunted with folks like Drury Outdoors, Realtree, and many other TV shows, and he's killed a pile of giant deer with some amazing stories. Let's get right into it.
My name is Doug Hampton. I've got a slight passion for whitetail deer hunting.
I can't even believe what's happening.
This deer right here, we'll start with. My son ended up taking this deer in Kansas, and if we move just right here to the left of that one, this is a Montana deer. The coolest thing about this deer is that he lived on 30 acres. He's right at 170 class deer, and so he was one of the biggest typical deer that was killed at that guy's place. To me, it's one of my most beautiful mounts, I'm going to tell you, but such a crazy story. But I guarantee you all these deer have some pretty crazy stories. This is a Kansas deer. I called him the Pipeline 9. I was getting a lot of pictures of that deer that he was crossing a pipeline there in Kansas. And man, he had a pretty wide range. We actually left at 10:45. We went to town to get some lunch, crawled back in the blind at 12 o'clock. And I want to say it was 12:15, and he came walking right out. And I ended up taking him. This year, I actually killed him with a crossbow because I had back surgery earlier that season. I ended up taking 4 deer that year that were in the 150 class range, and I had an absolute blast. I went on a rage and killed 4 really nice bucks that year, so that was one of them. This deer here, my son Eli killed this deer. I bow hunted that deer, and I never did get him in range. We got on that deer, and he came out, and Eli made a pretty long shot with the 243 and ended up hitting him. We didn't know how good he hit him, and we went later on, and we ended up finding him. He went about 20 yards. Eli's just killed some really good deer. You're going to see more of those here in just a minute. So this buck here, we called Curly. He was a 5.5-year-old buck. He had the curled up tines and 150 class deer. This was the first buck that my wife had ever taken. Really, I think it was the first buck that she had ever seen from a stand. The deer comes out there, and every time she got ready to shoot, something happened. I said, "All right, are you ready?" No. So finally, the deer turned around, and I said, "It's either now or never. You're either going to shoot him or he's gone forever." And she ended up shooting him and hit him and dropped him right where he was. And that was a super, super awesome experience. I want to say we did a little bit of dancing right after you killed that deer. Did we do the Dougie? Not in Kentucky. Once again, this was filmed for Dream Season as well, and I think it was Dream Season The Journey, the very first day of the season, and ended up, this deer came in, he literally did the old read the script, came down the tree line, and ended up making a shot on him. I ended up, taking this deer in Adams County, Ohio. I met some friends there. It was, my hunting had basically been taken away from me a week prior to that. I put a post out on Facebook and said, "Hey, I'm wanting to hunt in Ohio. If anybody's got anything, I don't mind doing whatever I have to do." And a guy reached out to me and started showing me some pictures. And first day, very rarely do I ever kill anything on the first day, but he just came right in there and ended up making a good shot. Then we have these 2 bucks up here. Whenever I started filming for television, people say, "Well, you go to the Midwest and you go all over and you kill these big bucks, but you're just not doing it at home." This deer in particular, when I took him, he was 6.5 years old. That deer had been shot at the day before 3 times. I found that out a little later. Where he was shot at was way over a mile from me. My cousin hunted about 1.5 miles from me. The morning I killed him, my cousin had him on camera. This particular deer, as big as he is, he's making big circles. And so that's one of those things that was supposed to be my buck. The good Lord wanted me to get him, and I ended up getting him, made a perfect shot, and he only ran like 15 to 20 yards. This deer, my son shot, Eli shot, off the same stand that I killed Popeye, the one we just talked about. That deer was shot with a rifle 3 times in 3 different years. We done named the deer 9 lives, right? I mean, he's going to live forever, but he didn't. This deer, that's an Iowa buck right here. Really cool deer. I didn't have any history with the deer whatsoever. I was hunting with Fat Racks Outfitters and ended up taking that buck, and really cool wide deer. And I was just super, super proud to get him. It was one of those hunts that he was literally like the only buck we saw. And it was one of those that had we not seen him, we may not even killed a deer the whole season. If you move over to this deer here, this is a buck that I killed in Kansas. And so for the longest time, that was my biggest bow buck. I called him Double Deuce. I don't know how many cameras you can put on about a 20-acre piece, but in that 20 acres, I had dozens of cameras. And I started picking him up walking down a creek drainage, and I knew that I had to get him on the other side of that drainage. So I got a plan together, and I drove my truck in, and I literally parked my truck to where when he walked into that field, he would see my truck. And I felt like if he saw my truck, it would push him to the left side of the drainage to my new setup. And apparently it worked like a charm, because that evening I could see him walking to me, and he was turning and he was looking at my truck. And he would walk some more, and then he would turn and he would look at my truck. And so I ended up using my vehicle to push him to the other side of the drain, and that put him right where he was right in my business, and ended up making, I think it was like a 28-yard shot. He didn't go very far, and he's been my biggest bow buck for a long, long time. Okay, so if you look up here on the top left, that is a deer we called Bailey. Super cool deer, big 8-point. I knew him for several years as well. I actually hunted that deer super hard and saw him several times, and finally, I want to say it was November the 18th. All I can tell you is it felt like we were 5 months into November, because I had hunted every day for that deer, and finally he chased a doe across the bean field, and he come into like, I think 21 yards, and I ended up making the shot. And I normally would never shoot one quartering to me like that, but I felt really, really good with it, and he did not go very far. I put a really good shot on him, and I knew when I shot that he was not going to go too far. So moving into this deer, this is a deer that my wife killed. What you can't know about him when you get a picture is the deer weighed well over 300 pounds. It was, to this day, the biggest bodied deer that anyone in my family's ever killed. 10.5 years old. You want to tell us about it?
This was 2011. I owned my own business at the time. I told the girls that worked for me, I'm going out of town for a week. Don't call me. Don't text me. I'm going to be out of pocket. So we get to Kansas, planning to stay there for a whole week. We go in to hunt the afternoon. Doug had to go brush in the blind before we could get in the blind. And so, I'm on the left, and the deer's coming from the left, so I can't see anything. And he's over here quietly freaking out, trying to get the camera on me and on the deer, and then all of a sudden, just slowly through the frame, I see antlers. It happened so fast. Mm-hmm. I got the gun up, and I had a muzzle loader, and I shot, and I thought I missed.
And I'm like, oh my God, why did you say you missed? And she said, well, he didn't fall over. I was like, are you serious? So we go back, we look at the footage, and we look at it. It was a little back, but it was definitely a fatal shot. He didn't make it very far in there at all. You never know. When in doubt, you know what you got to do. Back out.
And that time we did do the Dougie.
We did the Dougie on that. I'm telling you, she broke the Dougie down on that. It was a good one. Everybody dreams of killing a giant whitetail, and what a giant whitetail is to you may not be the same thing it is to me, but I gotta tell you, not in my wildest dreams did I ever dream that I would kill a 200+ inch deer. South Arkansas guy, and I had some really good friends that at Fat Racks Outfitters, and so they made me feel at home. One year I come up here and I agreed to pass a 170 to 175 inch 3-year-old deer. I'm not one of those that likes passing bucks that are 170 inches, but I knew he was a 3-year-old. I agreed with it. Matter of fact, I told him, I said, if I think he's 4 when he steps out there, we may call it audible. But when he stepped out there, I knew without a doubt he was a 3-year-old buck. So I ended up letting him walk off. I thought, what are the odds of me getting a tag next year? What are the odds of that deer still being there? What are the odds of all these things going through my mind? And one thing led to another. The deer never, as far as I know, nobody ever had any pictures of him. Fast forward to 2020. Okay, we're in the middle of the pandemic. And I got an Iowa tag. I'm going back up there, and Jeremy sends me pictures of this deer, and he said, hey, he's back. We didn't know for sure because we didn't have any recent pictures of him that he was still there, but deer hunters have instincts. And I just felt in my heart that the deer was still alive. I felt like I knew the drainage that he would be living in. I felt like I knew everything I needed to know about this deer. I think it was day 4 of the first shotgun season. I told him, I said, I want to go in, I want to get in a lock on, and I want to watch this drainage. And I want to see what kind of movement is coming in and out of that drainage. And that morning, we had just a different wind than we had for the afternoon. So I kept staring across there, and it was, I don't know, maybe 100, 120 yards. I kept looking at this one tree, and I was like, man, if I was in that tree right there, I could see everything. I feel like my odds were going to be really good with the wind switching. It was about 4 o'clock whenever I saw my first deer, and I was sitting there, and I had some doe that started feeding around downwind of me. And when they got downwind of me, I was like, oh my goodness, this is going to be a short evening, And so I'll never forget, I'm staring at these doe, and I hear a twig snap, and it's out in front of me about 125 yards. And he's standing there, and all I can see, like everybody says, oh, I just saw a rib cage. This was a cattle-sized rib cage. Tines sticking up everywhere. And at the time, it really honestly wasn't registering that it was that deer. And I think it was around 60 yards, and he stops. And when he stops, I'm looking at the doe and filming and looking at the camera and looking at the doe and going back and forth. And then I look up, and the doe turns and looks at him. And when he does, I just turn around, I reach, and I grab the gun. I don't have time to grab the shooting stick. I don't have time to do anything. And so I just got the gun. And I remember taking a deep breath and squeezing the trigger. But when I squeezed the trigger, he hit the ground. And I'm going to tell you, like the next, 4 or 5 days were crazy good, because every day I'd wake up and I was like, did that really happen? Like it legitimately took a week for me to realize that it really happened. Like it really did happen. And so officially he went 213 and 5/8. And definitely the biggest buck that I've ever killed. But a deer like that will make you load your family up and move them 650 miles. And that leads you to the next deer. So this deer, on my first year after we moved to Iowa, we started getting pictures of this deer really early, and I wanted him bad. And I finally had an opportunity at him. And I want to say it was around the 15th of November, and I thought I had him figured out, and he walked out at 60 yards. It had snowed that day. It was snowing and drizzling and then turned into snow. Everything was just turning really bad, really fast. I wanted to be in a blind. I just ended up being late. And so rather than doing that, I ended up going across and getting in a box blind that was there. I look up. I'm not expecting anything. Hadn't seen a deer all morning. And then I think it was right before 9 o'clock. I look up and he's just cutting across the bean field. And so I went into quick mode, trying to get my bow, trying to get everything. I drew back. and I put the pin right on him. I had already ranged. He was exactly 60 yards. I practiced that almost every day. Should have all worked out. Ever so slightly bumped that stand, and it shot that arrow over his back. And once again, I thought, well, I've ruined this spot. He'll never be back here. And so I didn't know where the deer had gone. I had no clue. I was just going to scout an area where I thought he might be. Accidentally parked on the side of the road across from somebody that was hunting. I didn't know they were there. The guy comes out there. He's irate. He's really upset. And he says, I'll tell you what, nobody's going to kill that big deer if you keep messing us up. And I was like, what big deer are you talking about? And so he kind of, whether he knew it or not, he tipped me off to where the deer was. And so, which made me, I took my truck around. We were on our land, but he was right on a public road. They were hunting right next to the road. Totally legal what they were doing. So I decided to take a decoy in. I was going to hunt him with the decoy. And when I put the decoy out, seemed like almost every deer in the field would come and check that decoy out, put them right in range. But when he came out, he shied away from the decoy. I ended up having 4 encounters with him. Finally, it dawned on me, he doesn't like the decoy, so I will try to make him go the way I want him by putting the decoy out. And when I tell you it worked like a charm, he went directly away from the decoy, and it ended up putting him 33 yards, drew back, put the pin on him, pulled the trigger, and he did not go too awful far. I walked up on him, and so the feeling of putting my first resident Iowa tag on that deer was absolutely amazing.
Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to support what we're doing here at Exodus, be sure to hit the subscribe button or head to our website, ExodusOutdoorGear.com, and use the code Whitetail to save 10% off our entire site for a limited time. You can save 10% on the Exodus Render, a Verizon 4G LTE camera backed by our 5-year no BS warranty, or our brand new Exodus MMT arrows, which are tailored built to your hunting specs. Be sure to check that out on our website. Until next time, see you.